Chapter 5 Making Ends Meet. When's Omar, Mama and I moved into tiny upstairs room next door to Uncle Eric's wife's family. He was currently a soldier in Russia, as was our landlord. Actually, it was the landlady's house, or rather her old father's, who spent his last days in his bedroom downstairs. They gave us the permission to live upstairs. Mama was a very practical person. For Christmas, she had made me a dollhouse with all the usual rooms, its furniture, and inhabitants too. The dollhouse was put away and brought out every Christmas. It was like a new present every year. We were poor and there was no money for presents. But I didn't know any better and looked forward to Christmas. Mama also always had the best decorated Christmas tree of the three households. She stretched out cotton batting into a thin, fog-like veil over the tree, with the colorful globes looking through, so wondrous and mysterious looking. There were no electric lights on a string at that time. Candles and special metal holders were clipped to the tree branches outside the veil, emitting soft flickering lights. Yes, they had to be carefully placed so the dripping of the wax candles would go into the holders and not cause any fires. First, Maria and sons from downstairs, and Aunt Käthe, Uncle Eric's wife, with my cousin Erika from next door, would join us to admire our tree and sing a Christmas song or two. Here we would extinguish the candles. Then all of us went downstairs to Maria's, and finally to Käthe's place. There we sang more songs and enjoyed hot tea and cookies. After Uncle Eric returned from war, he played the songs on his violin. I remember that he often complained that our singing was lame and lacked his tempo. He would start again and was only satisfied until it sounded much better. He should have been a music teacher instead of working at a foundry. Oh yes, he played the clarinet as well as the violin. Food was getting scarce. Meanwhile, the war reached on and food was getting scarce. It was rationed. The economy was going downhill fast instead of forward as Hitler had promised. Men were taken from their place of work to fight in Russia with no replacement, save for females drafted into factories producing war materials. At one point, I was about 6 or 7 years old when I was taken in a big black car to Stuttgart, 93 kilometers away. Aunt Frida, the sister of my father, and Uncle Fritz were well-to-do people. He was a builder and so owned a car. I liked my uncle as he took me to fun things. Once we went to a woman's mud wrestling match. Another time he led a big horse with me sitting on it. I really liked Dad. He was an easygoing man. My aunt, though, I was not able to bond with. She was a bit bossy and wanted me to do such uninteresting things as housework and cooking, both of which I was not interested in, not at that time anyway. After about a week, I developed a bad cold with a cough that would not go away. I lay in bed feverish and just wanted to go home. So my visit was shortened. Much later I was enlightened that I was to be adopted by my aunt and uncle, if it worked out. They were unable to have children of their own, but they would have had the means to get me out of poverty. This visit was to be a trial period. At first I was shocked that Mama and Oma would have given me away, but they were just looking out for my well-being. It would have meant enough food to eat, clothing, and paid for higher education. Making ends meet. I remember the many trips to the woods where we collected berries and different kinds of mushrooms. Vance Oma was very knowledgeable about mushrooms. The smaller beech trees that weren't giants, we shook till the nuts came tumbling down. The nuts were took away to a press a few miles by bicycle, and voila, we had some oil. The woods also supplied pine cones and sticks for our little cannon stove in the living room. This also heated the bedroom via a stovepipe running through and alongside the bedroom wall. Briquettes made from coal dust were rationed, as was, I believe, 1 cubic meter of wood. Since there was no man in the house, Mama had to saw, hack, and split it herself. I remember I was a pretty good splitter myself by age 10. The wood then was piled into a basket and winched up via a pulley to a window up in the attic. The attic also was my secret escape from the world. I often snuck up there and read adventure books for hours. After the farmers had harvested their fields, we would go and glean what they left. The wheat and rye kernels we brought to a mill some 10 kilometers away, reachable by bicycle. Voila, there was a bit of flour. We kept 2 rabbits in stalls in the backyard. They were fed lots of dandelions, which grew everywhere in abundance. Here was some meat. I don't remember who killed them, but I think it was the butcher, as the rabbits almost became pets. In the tiny backyard we grew some vegetables as well. Mama and Vance Oma became dressmakers, always being practical in sewing things, like making a little dress or skirt or blouse for me from my mother's bigger dresses. She was very talented, and among others, oversized customers were seeking her out as they were unable to obtain clothing their size. There just wasn't enough food for us to eat. Mama had to get creative. She got the idea of making dolls for the nearby farmers' children. And beautiful those dolls were. She made them from coat hangers, kapok fiber, and white cotton cloth. The hair was black yarn. She stitched in blue eyes, eyebrows, a little raised nose, and red lips. Of course, they were beautifully dressed, such as traditional German dirndls, the national Bavarian dress you might still see today during Oktoberfest, and had shoes. With these dolls, she got on her bicycle and drove out into the countryside from farmer to farmer to barter them for food, as she was sure their kids would be delighted. And this they were. Mama always came home with something like eggs, milk, or a bit of meat. One day, she left and came home empty-handed. Nobody would give her anything. Bicycling home at dusk, she felt so downtrodden with not being able to provide for her family. She wished that all the farmer's milk would go sour. And guess what? Our landlady bragged that no farmer would refuse to give her milk, as she was a local. The next morning, however, everywhere she went, the milk had gotten sour. Coincidence or what? Everybody in the neighborhood brought their loaves of dough to the local baker. he shoved all of them together into a huge wood-burning oven. Once a week, a heavenly aroma of freshly baked bread wafted across the street, through our windows. The baker also kept a pig in his barn. Once a year, the pig was slaughtered, and the whole neighborhood was invited to bring a gallon jar or such to collect the heavenly tasting soup stock that he had made from it. Shoes, however, were hard to come by. In winter, I wore Uncle Ernest's rubber boots that were, of course, hopelessly too big for me. We stuffed them with newspaper. Still, my feet were always cold. Since that time, I have always had post-nasal drip, a runny nose. Still at 87, at age 87. Playtime. There were hardly any cars on the roads, as only a few business people owned one. The side streets were our playground. These were not supervised, as there was no crime and such then. All the children called each other from the street and gathered to play games. We were a noisy bunch, playing ball, hopscotch, and so on. Often our neighbor, a nice rosy-cheeked lady called Bertha, would call down from her window that we should play further down the street, as her mother, an old lady, wanted to sleep. In the afternoon? For us kids, this was unimaginable. We obliged, though, but the next day we had all forgotten about it. My cousin Erica had a bad habit of biting people if things did not go her way. At one time she bit both me and little Paul from downstairs. We were all afraid of her. She grew up to be a very friendly gal. Once of the more exciting games was the Schnitzeljagd, snippet hunt. This was when we were around 12 kids in the neighborhood. The leader of half of the group, the Heides, had a few little snippets of paper, schnitzel, and ran with his group as fast as he was able to and put the first snippet with a message at a prominent place. This would tell the seekers vaguely where the second snippet was located. The other half of the group, the seekers, had put their arms over their eyes and counted to 100. While they were looking for the first snippet, the hiders ran on and deposited another snippet somewhere with the approximate location, and so on. We lived in a valley with wooded hills all around, so there were plenty of hiding places. One time we went far through meadows, along the river and along the railroad tracks, and were hiding in the tunnel when a train came roaring along, puffing clouds of steam. We were scared out of our wits. I remember I pressed my body against the tunnel wall. We all got out safely, though. Even though it was an exciting experience, the scare and an explosive dressing down from the railroad man that lived in a little house nearby made us never do it again. Some of us wanted to learn how to swim. Mama sewed cotton cushions with straps around. I forgot how it worked, but we had to blow air into the cushions. It held in there for a very short while until deflation, long enough, though, for us to swim a few strokes. That was in our river, Brents, close to the turning Millville. No danger, though, to get caught, as the river moved very slowly and only reached to our waist. The thing became more serious when I stood on a footbridge further down the valley. Some youth came along, giggled, and seized me and threw me down into the river. The bridge was barely 6 feet above the water, but there was a forest of green, wavy water plants in the river. I was mortally afraid of those plants, as they curled around my thrashing legs. I could not swim yet at that point, but dog paddled wildly to shore. There were several limestone quarries in our hills, one being only about a kilometer from our street. "Let's do some mountain climbing," somebody said. Fortified with ropes, we ventured forth and started climbing. I was the only girl in the group, always a tomboy, and the last one up. Just as I was reaching the top, I slipped and would have fallen if the boy ahead of me would not have quickly thrown his rope behind my neck and in one swoop pulled me up. I realized that I was very lucky. That's another thing I never did again. I was a fast learner. So often was bored with repeated lessons in class and became a bit of a troublemaker. Often I would have to stand in the corner or outside the door. Once I went home when this took too long. Shouldn't have done it, as I got a huge load of homework with page after page. I shall not, and so on. My friend Anneliese, who sat beside me in class, and I read Billy Jenkins and Tom Brock's American Western magazines under the desk. We were fascinated with American cowboy stories while growing up in Germany. When it was our time to read from a school book, the kids behind us kicked our feet, and the teacher never found out about our secret cowboy stories. There was one to us boring teacher in particular, Herr Kröner, an always serious-looking older man we wished to have fun with. Across from our school there was a sports hall. When the time came for class, we would hide behind this building. We saw the teacher come towards the hall and ran over to the other side. As he looked there, we did the opposite and ran to class. He didn't think that was funny at all. Lots of extra homework. Then there was Gummifatzel, our handiwork teacher. A typical old maid. If she did not like somebody, she called them out. With stick in her hand, she made us stretch our hand out in front of her so she could strike it. We already knew what would happen and quickly pulled our hand back. Gummifatzel's stick would land full force on her own knee. This, of course, was hilarious for us. She especially did not like me. Since my mother was a dressmaker, I was familiar with a sewing machine and was helping other classmates. Gummifatzel still gave me a D. That means, a D, every year. After her retirement, a younger teacher asked me to model a blouse I had sewn in class and show it to my principal. I earned B's from then on. Finally, some fairness. One other thing comes to mind. Saturdays were bath days. On our hearth, we heated pots of water to dump into a small wooden tub, which we had to lug up from the basement to the kitchen on the second floor. First, my mother would take her bath. Vence Oma was next and I last. Yes, sometimes even Big Maria, our landlady, would climb into the by now quite cloudy water. But Maria was Maria. This house had no shower, bathtub, or flush toilet. I wonder how many of these smaller houses were equipped with such luxuries.